Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World, the podcast that celebrates the remarkable women of the Viking Age. From fierce warriors and powerful queens to wise seers and cunning goddesses, these women left an indelible mark on history. Join authors Johanna Wittenberg and K.S. Barton each month as we explore the stories, achievements, and impact of Norse women. Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World. This is episode 21, and today Johanna and I will be chatting with author Octavia Randolph. I'm K.S. Barton, the author of the Norse family trilogy in which a young Viking woman and a Viking warrior are caught in a deadly blood feud between two brothers. And with me is Johanna Wittenberg. Hi, Johanna.
Hello, Kim. I'm Johanna Wittenberg, author of the Norse Women series, which is the story of a real Norse queen who ruled alone in the early Viking Age. And with us is our special guest, Octavia Randolph. Welcome, Octavia.
Hello. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Our pleasure. Well, Octavia is the author of the Circle of Ceridwen Saga, which is a book series set in 9th century England, Denmark, and the Baltic island of Gotland, where Octavia lives. Octavia has a lifelong fascination with the making of England, along with the material artifacts of the Anglo-Saxon and Viking Age. And this has ever guided her work. The hand-carved combs, skillfully wrought swords, and the gemmed goblets of the world of the saga. The path of her interests has led to intensive on-site research in England, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, and of course, Gotland. She's a frequent speaker at both international festivals and museums, and she has been the recipient of artistic fellowships at the Ingmar Bergman Estate in Faro and Sweden, and MacDowell, Ledig House International, and Birdcliff. So, Octavia, tell us a little bit about the series and also your newest book, To the Sun, which is your 11th book, I believe, in this series.
It's actually, Joanna, it's the 12th saga novel because the prequel, Sidroc the Dane, is unnumbered. So it's actually 12 novels out now, which is wonderful. So even though I'm now writing book 12, it will be the 13th saga book. The Circle of Ceridwen Saga is a multi-generational family saga. As you had just nicely pointed out, it is set in late 9th century. During the time of Alfred the Great. Alfred is 21 years old when the book opens in 871, and right now in book 11 and book 12, actually, which I'm writing now, he is about to die. He died at age 50 in 899. So we've gone through the span of his illustrious reign. Alfred is a occasional character in the books. He's one of many actual personages that interact with my fictional characters, who I refer to as the saga folk. But as a multi-generational saga, the story really begins with two young women in book one who meet on the road, Ceridwen, the titular character, and a young noblewoman, Alfwin. And Alfwin is traveling to a captured keep in Lindesay, modern-day Lincoln, where she is going to wed a Danish warlord. The story follows them and their families, so that now both women are young grandmothers. So we're very much concerned with the young adult children. At the end of the third book, Ceridwen actually finds herself here on the island of Gotland, and so Gotland has become a setting of every novel since that third book. So much of the action in each book does take place in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, or the former Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, I should say, because of course the Danelaw partitioned the country at the Battle of Wedmore in 878. Then the Sidroc the Dane takes place. Quite a bit of it takes place in Denmark, in Jutland, and Sidroc is a young warrior who comes to Engleland to find his fortune, and that prequel dovetails into book one. So we're moving through this large cast of characters as they develop and grow. And over a fairly expansive realm, book 11, To the Sun, actually takes our some secondary characters on the extraordinarily hazardous but extremely profitable route from Gotland to down the Dnieper River to Styria Ladoga and then down to Micklegarda to Constantinople. So that journey has begun in book 11 and will be completed in book 12. Since Scotland was such an important point on the Silk Road, it was really important for me to really be talking about its contributions. And Gotland, of course, was always a very wealthy island. It was an independent island. It was known for its riches. It was known for its prosperous farmers. It were also traders. It was also a very peaceful island because it had no king. So it was really an ideal place for Ceridwen to end up at the end of book 3. So anyway, the landscape, both actual and political, is quite expansive in the series.
Sounds wonderful.
Were you already living on Gotland when you wrote book 3, or was that what led you to the island?
I discovered Gotland in 1999 when I was on a very extensive research tour throughout all of Scandinavia, landing in Stockholm, going up to Uppsala, then down to Gotland, and then sweeping through Skåne and up through Denmark and Norway. But when I got to Gotland, I came here for one specific thing in 1999, and that is to see the extraordinary treasure that is apparent in our standing stones, that the pictorial standing stones from Gotland. There is not a single book about the Viking era and early Norse life that you will open that does not depict one, if not several, of our standing stones, because they're so rich in pictorial information about the era. So I came to see those stones and really fell in love with it. I did not return to Gotland. Let me see, that was in 99. I wrote book 3 in 2002. And, remembering how much I loved Gotland and what I'd learned there, I had the two main characters end up, on Gotland at the end of book 3. And then as the books picked up steam, I really wanted to, continue writing about it. So I kept on with the series and eventually returned to Gotland in 2015. 2016 was when I was granted the fellowship at the Ingman Bergman, which is it's in the province of Gotland. It's another smaller island just north of Gotland proper. So I was granted an artistic residency there for a month, which was really wonderful. I began writing book 6 there. And then after that, I just came back more and more frequently, renting houses and renting apartments here as I was researching, making videos, and just writing, and then immigrated permanently in 2018. So my commitment to the island has been long and deep. And I'm very happy to and proud to be a permanent resident now of Sweden.
I love that story, how you took that love of this one place and it has now infused all of your writing. That's lovely.
Thank you.
So you've been writing for a long time, obviously. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to become self-published?
Yes, the short answer of that is through necessity. So I began writing what became book 1 in 1991. So I had a very good literary agent. I finished writing the book and had a very good literary agent in the mid-90s who unfortunately couldn't place the book, passed me along to his younger colleague who also could not place the book, even though both of them really believed in it. And it was quite frustrating because I truly felt the book had merit. However, be that as it may, in 1998, I created an author website, which was quite an unusual thing in those days. And I started serially releasing book 1 to really be able to communicate with readers, to be able to build a readership. So I was literally giving away the book, and there was such enthusiasm for book one. It was quickly read by over 100,000 people around the world, and that it was encouraging me to continue writing. So I wrote two and three, and again, I created the website in 98 and 99. I made this very large research trip and discovered Gotland. So in 2002, when I wrote book three, The Claiming, I had Ceridwen and Sidroc end up on Gotland. And then the books just lay fallow for a number of years until the advent of the Kindle. I was not the earliest adopter of the Kindle. That came out in 2008, but in 2012, I decided, well, I've got these three books. Let me put them out there as ebooks and see what happens.
Well, what happened was
I am smiling because, of course, they very quickly found a readership, and it was extremely gratifying because I felt, oh my goodness, there's readers out there that love these characters and want more of them, and so I was, hugely encouraged to start. And this is a point for an interesting anecdote, because this is the writing life. There was 9 years in my life between writing the last words, the last scene of book three, and writing the first opening sentences of book four. 9 years.
Wow.
Elapsed in my real life. In my novels, though, I collapse that to 9 hours. It's literally just an overnight for the characters. And that's what happened, is that once the books took off, and I said, okay, you've got to pick up. It was a more or less self-sufficient trilogy in several ways. It could be read fairly satisfyingly as a trilogy, although we didn't know what was going on with Alfwin, unfortunately, because those first books were all in the first person. But then, the books were met with such response that I immediately started writing book four, book five, and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of what happened. So I am one of those indies, independently published with my own imprint, who has been blessed with a fantastic readership. And I'm extremely fortunate with that. And I'm just really, it is in many ways, since the barriers to publication are gone, anybody can publish a book. That deep frustration that comes from having been kept out of the arena for years, and believe me, it was extremely painful. And anybody who's gone through that and then been vindicated by having your books become highly popular, it is extreme. The lost years really do rankle. It can be quite painful to look back. But the beautiful thing is now that authors do not have barriers to the audience. The secret is to write a meritorious book. And that's one of the things that I just find that so many people are writing even big series and just putting them out there prematurely without having done the work needed and the internal work needed. As I've oftentimes said, there are a lot of people out there writing books who do not know what their own book is truly about. They have not discovered the deepest theme of the book. They have not understood the question that they are trying to pose to their characters, to the readers, and to themselves. And it's deep, deep internal work to write about something important. And the world just doesn't need more adventure stories set in the Anglo-Saxon and Viking period. What the world needs are a gripping framework with extraordinary characters that grow and develop. And that's what I'm urging people, the writers that I try to help who write to me and ask for advice, is that really to do the hard internal work so that you yourself understand, what is my book truly about? What am I really questioning here? And again, it's posing a question. You're posing a question to yourself, your characters, and your readers. It's an unvoiced question. You're never going to say it, but there's some deeper mystery which you are probing, and that's absolutely got to drive you forward. And if it does drive you forward, and you create memorable characters around that, you will be unstoppable.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's so nice when a reader does reach out or leaves a review that reflects back what you were trying to do. Sometimes it's like, oh, they get it. Oh, I love that this person gets what I was actually trying to say.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get that a lot because you really have that great relationship with your readers. And you're a pioneer. When you were talking about getting in there right away, I was like, oh, Octavia was one of the pioneers of indie publishing.
It's wonderful that you did that too, because like you said, we would never have been graced with your books if you hadn't done them.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice, Johanna. Yes. Well, it's strictly out of necessity, but it's been the correct path for me, and given me the freedom to really write my books the way I want to. And also, I'm very big on community with readers and building strong reading community. And that's the time that I spent every day with my readers, communicating with them in the Facebook, fan groups, and answering email and everything else I'm doing. These tours I'm doing of Gotland, it's an incredible community building opportunity, to bring people here to Gotland so they can actually see the landscapes and the artifacts that inspire my writing. It's a wonderful thing, and so there's many ways in which we can build community, and that's the other thing I try to encourage other authors to do, is think about how you can more deeply communicate with your readers, how you can really give them enough that absorbs them and enfolds them. And it's so gratifying. It's so much fun to be involved with your readers. It's very, very nourishing for me. So I'm grateful that I do have such responsive readers and that I can interact with them to the level that I do.
Well, and to a large degree, that's the reason that we write. I mean, it's a form of communication. We're not writing only for ourselves, although
just the deepest form of communication. It really is. Yes, it's very, very profound. I mean, how many people have books in their lives in lieu of other human relationships? We certainly saw that during the pandemic, that people were turning to books, turning to characters in books for comfort and for guidance. It's extremely profound. It's a sacred thing to write, and it's a sacred thing to be read. We are very fortunate to be read.
That's very well put. That's very well put. So, what drew you to the time period of 9th century England?
I'm English by descent, and I was always very interested from a girl, originally with the artifacts of the Anglo-Saxon period and the making of England. As I have said in the past, I do not write books about Vikings. I write about the creation of the English people. And in over a million words in my books, the word Viking occurs exactly once. And that is in the prequel, when Sidroc, who goes a Viking, experiences his first kill, is very upset about that. And then he's lying on the ground afterwards, and he says, "This is what it is to go a Viking." It's the only time that word ever exists in my books, because it was so rarely used during the time period. I mean, if you look at the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, if you look at the Battle of Maldon, if you look at all of the poetry that's out there, the Vikings, that word almost never occurs. It's the great army, it's the Danes, because they were Danes largely in England, and it's the heathen horde. Those are the three.
I was just going to say that.
Our favorite, the heathen horde. So of course I use the word Viking to describe the books, and in my advertisements, of course I do, because it's just shorthand, which is easily understandable. But that's not what I'm writing about. And I think that's, yeah. So I does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So we talk about our research a lot on this podcast, and we wondered about your research journey. You've told us a little bit about it, about the traveling you've done and how extensive and what led you to move to Gotland. But what challenges have you faced, and what methods and sources have you used in your research?
Well, I've been extremely fortunate to be able to do the amount of travel that I've done, and over decades. In the room right next to me, we're in my studio right here, and the room right next to me is my library, and where I have over 300 books about the Anglo-Saxon and Viking Age. So I have a very extensive library, and including irreplaceable books to me from the Victorian era and all the way up to the latest things, because it's such a rich time now for discoveries. There's just so much going on, not only bioarchaeology and everything, but just new ways of finding hoards and burial chambers and whatnot. So you're constantly learning because there's always new things coming up. So I think staying curious really helps. It's very important for me to have my own reference materials at my fingertips. We're so blessed to have the internet now because it's really easy to check things and quickly find old maps, for instance, things like that. So that's really helpful. As the great late Barbara Tuchman said, research is endlessly fascinating, and it's when you start when you start on the actual writing that you just get so involved in the research. It is so thrilling, but you're just skimming along the top of everything that you've absorbed. I mean, really, this trip that I wrote about in book 11, I spent 5 weeks of solid research of that trip from Styria Ladoga down to the shores of the Black Sea. And it was very laborious research because not only has the landscape been obliterated by Soviet era hydroelectric plant, these incredibly dangerous rapids that the men had to go through, all of that is just gone. So it's it was very hard for me to sort of piece things together. And of course, since these were Norsemen, they were Gotlanders, they were not literate, so they were not leaving. They would leave behind a marker where their comrade was drowned, and then they come back to Gotland and they'd make a standing stone, that in his memorial. But there was just not a lot written. I mean, there's a Russian chronicle called the Primary Chronicle that talks about the route. So that was really just 5 weeks of just solid. And that doesn't even get us to Constantinople. It was just to get us to the shores of the Black Sea. But it was an indulgence, which I enjoyed very much. And but this is how, the things about the wheeled ships, it's really fascinating things came up. There's a wonderful little ship here, which is now in the Historiska Museum in Stockholm. But it's the replica of a small Viking ship, which was named when it was built in the 1980s, the Krampmachen. And this little boat was found in the north of Gotland in a shallow lake, which is called a träsk, like a marshy lake. And a professor, Eric Nyland, and a group of young men decided to rebuild this ship and to try to replicate the journey of a small group of traders from Gotland all the way to Miklagardr. So it unfortunately they were thwarted again by Soviet Union regulations. They couldn't get through Poland, all the borders in those days. It was the 80s. It would have been much easier to have done it. But over a series of 5 years during the summers, this young group, not by going down the Dnieper, they were never permitted to do that, but going down through Poland, through the Dvina and so on forth, they finally got this little ship to the walls of Constantinople. So, one of the ways that they did that for portages was actually putting the ship on wheels. And so, I had seen many years ago a contemporary drawing from an illuminated manuscript of these drekars, these Viking ships on wheels, and going across the land. And they were approaching the walls of Constantinople. Which of course was wildly out of scale because you could sail to the walls of Constantinople on the Black Sea, but it was a way to depict what part of the portage was like. So that was a fascinating part of the research. Was I had been interested in Krampmachen for a long time, and again, to return to the standing stones here, that this is how we even know how Norse ships were rigged and what their sails were like, because of the beautiful depictions on the Gotland standing stones that tell us how these narrow strips of linen and linsey woolsey were interwoven with each other on the diagonal. And so when Professor Nyland, built the Krampmachen, he had a woman who wove sails just like that. And I was just at Historiska a few weeks ago, and to see the Krampmachen there was wonderful. So it is really wonderful to be where I am, obviously, because I'm close to all the source material. I'm surrounded by extraordinary numbers of Stone Age, Iron Age, and Viking era, as well as later medieval artifacts. I'm living in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's pretty inspiring just to be here. So I'm very fortunate to have so much at my fingertips.
And does Scotland inspire you in other ways? Like, how does it inspire the characters, the story, or just by living there? I mean, it must
just
be nice
by living here, and the Gotlandic. Again, I've got two characters who land here coming from really war-torn situations, and to come to 9th century Gotland, which was a real relative haven of peace and security, and prosperous to boot, where they could start over and go into trading and everything. It's been very, very inspiring for me. And because the island is so physically beautiful, it was a very unique. It's all limestone with these huge limestone rocks, these huge seascape, sea stacks, and it's a very unique kind of landscape for such a small island. It also has a variety of different microclimates and types of terrain, which are really fascinating too. The south of the island is very different in its vegetation than the north of the island, and the center of the island, which was originally pretty much marsh, has been farmland for the last 400 years, and it's kind of the breadbasket of the island. So this extremely varied landscape, which is beautiful and inspirational. So yes, everything is, and also just the peace and quiet. I mean, I'm here, and I'm here, and as I have sometimes said, like a nun in a convent. That I'm really able to, working in the scriptorium, I'm really able to sit here and work. So that's great. And with the advent of Zoom, even participating in literary conferences and other events, it can be easily done from the comfort of your own home, and that's really a boon. I do enjoy travel, but the world oftentimes is coming here to me, and that's terrific as well.
Well, when you first started writing these books, there could not have been a lot of novels out there about this time period written by women with a woman as the main character, a strong woman as the main character, other than maybe romances. And I'm so glad that you decided to stay the course and not give up and just keep Ceridwen. I'm assuming you kept her as she was. You were not gonna just. I imagine maybe you had some agents or editors who maybe said change this or do that, and
no, and I never got that far.
Oh.
I'm
glad you didn't have to.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's the freedom of running your own imprint. No, what I had was initially, a literary agent who I really respected, who really respected the book. He asked me to take 100,000 words out of it, which I did. But other than that, yes, it was originally 300,000. So, but other than that, he was extremely respectful to the work. So I knew from the get-go that it was good because of who he was. But yes, it is, of course, it's a little fraught, this topic, because in the past few years in particular, with the explosion of all things Viking in popular media, one has to maintain one's sense of humor. When 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, I had Sidroc refer to Ceridwen as a shield maiden, little did I know that term would be bandied about the way it is now. I think the big thing is that there's now, again, mostly because of Hollywood and the excesses of Hollywood, there's so much of what I would refer to as aspirational attribution that we have so many women in particular that want to believe a certain scenario about the Viking Age and Norse women, and that has very, very little factual basis. And it's one tries to be indulgent about it, but it just the things that one hears really does give one pause because I mean just the and again I think a lot of this is because people have been watching TV shows that are just wildly ridiculous. I mean, just look at the costuming, look at the hair, these shaved heads, and if you had a shaved head in the Viking era, you were either a slave or had a really bad case of head lice. You did. I mean, in Anglo-Saxon England, I mean, a man's hair was so prized that Alfred even has a law against, if a man's hair or beard was forcibly cut, that you owed him a silver. You did. I mean, it was just. But you see these crazy hairstyles on these men, and oftentimes the women warriors, the half-shaved thing. I mean, again, let's look at the pictorial evidence that we have, the figurines that we have. Let's look at the Gotlandic standing stones, which depict many, many women, all of which have long hair tied in a knot in the back, like a pretzel knot going down the back. Just this, and all of the war paint and all this. It's just, the absurdity of the tattoos. Yes, we do know that the Norse had tattoos, but they were painstakingly punched in with quills and minerals, and they were not this huge, massive machine tattooing that you see on these characters that people think is real. I mean, the tattoos in the 9th century were much more similar to like a Maori tattoo, that Pacific Islanders, that kind of very, gentle outlining things. So Hollywood has done so much and added so much absurdity to it. Obviously, the discovery of BJ 581 in Burka, was a field day for people who want to believe, oh, of course women were warriors. This is the proof. Here is this woman who is, found with her sacrificed horses, a mare and a stallion, and archery and the taffel board on her lap, and so on and so forth. And again, the grave had been uncovered in Burka in 1889, and the bones had been really terribly jumbled up, and one of the boxes had 3 femurs in it. So it was. But anyway, I do hold that yes, that was actually a woman given that burial, but look at all the times that women were buried with swords. I mean, they're weaving swords too. I mean, having the taffel game on her lap, she was a sign of a tactician. She was somebody who was probably, analogous almost to, Ethelfled, the Lady of the Mercians, really smart, tactical leader. But Ethelfled was never on the field of battle. We have absolutely nothing to tell us that she ever led troops into battle. She had undoubtedly very skilled captains that she was in close contact with, but she wasn't out there. The whole idea that women were fighting in the shield wall is so absurd. And again, just look at the historic sources that we do have, all of which, of course, are pretty much, Anglo-Saxon, because that illiterate people could write these things down. But when you look at, the depictions from Anglo-Saxon England, and you see the division of battle labor, that the young boys with their slings and their round river stones, and then the slightly older boys and smaller men hurling javelins. And then you have the shield wall. Then you have the big, heavy guys who are going in because it's just such tremendous upper body strength that you need when you're colliding. The idea that women were fighting normally in the shield wall is absolutely absurd. I'm not saying that men and women cannot compete each other in martial arts on equal basis. You certainly can in kickboxing and things like this, but it is just a Hollywood conceit that you are going to have women in regular troops. This is not to say that, Tacitus obviously found in Germania, which he wrote in 98, that the bodies of dead women warriors, in that campaign. But this was much more like like Spartacus. These were desperate people at their last stand, and these were women fighting in that way. To think that women were, typically in a shield wall fighting shoulder to shoulder with men is, to me, laughable. And I'm telling you that because you're both writers and researchers, and it's just, go and talk to recreation people. Go to talk to the guys that are actually doing it. There's really good battle herds right here on the island, and it's just wrong. I mean, my favorite idea of the female warrior, and the one that's much more realistic, are the Scythians, the real Amazons, who are superior equestrians, excellent archers. And boy, that is an amazing combination. If you're a good equestrian and you are good with bow and arrow, you can really inflict a tremendous amount of damage on a standing army. So yes, those women, they were feared, and rightly feared. But in a shield wall, no. I'm sure you'll have lots of cards and letters. But Octavia has spoken.
Well, hey, it's fine with me.
So, to change the subject, how do you handle writing a long series? What are your challenges and rewards?
There are no challenges. The saga folk are just alive and living in me and talking to me all the time and wanting to tell their story. It's actually just flows. And one thing leads to another. I'm typically writing, as I'm writing one book, I'm also adding to my files for the next book, because things, are interlinked, as you well know when you write series, that something's happened here and you go, oh, yes, and that will trigger this. So every book actually takes me about 18 months to write, even though I can release a book every year. It's not a challenge. I mean, at the end of To the Sun, I actually wrote in the back, this is a never-ending series, because I was so tired of people. No, this is true. What would happen is people who just discovered the saga series, and they would just tear right through that 1 million words. I mean, in weeks, if not days, some of them. And then they'd come to the end and they'd go, what happened? She can't leave us like this, because they had never taken the time to look at the date of publication, and so they just thought that it had come to an abrupt end. And only my longtime readers understand, she can only write a book a year. So I would get these despairing reviews, on Goodreads and Amazon, and say, I can't believe she left it like this. I'm losing my mind. What a shame. So I just said, all right, I'm going to end this once and for all. So I actually, at the end of To the Sun, every book ends with the same words. It says, here ends book 11 of the Circle of Ceridwen Saga. That's all it says. Here ends book so-and-so. This one says, here ends book 11 of the Circle of Ceridwen Saga. This is a never-ending story. More books will follow.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
It really was. It really was, because I suddenly, since book 11 just came out in September, I just didn't have this terrible, the week after it came out, I didn't have these, people howling, saying, oh, how could you have left it like this? So now they know.
Yeah,
that's
a good idea.
there aren't any challenges. The satisfactions, of course, are manifold. I mean, you have, I feel like you've got a whole, army of readers that are with you and waiting with you, and and discussing the books with you. And every time a new book comes out, a subgroup is created on Facebook from the main forum, which is the fan group for the books. And so we create a new subgroup, and so we can discuss the new book without spoilers for people who have just entered the forum. And that's something I highly recommend, right? So that you can, and every single book that comes out, we create this subgroup. And that way, people who have maybe just read one or two books and they're in the main body, the forum, are not subjected to spoilers from the new book. And so that's really wonderful. And then I always give live chats, that I a couple of weeks ago, I did a live chat, one in the morning for my Australian and New Zealand readers, and then one in the evening for my North American and European readers. So that's always fun. So that, people, once they've had a chance to, I guess the book had been out for about 5 weeks when I did that. So there was, a big enough body of people in the subgroup. And I said, okay, let's do a live chat now. And so we scheduled that. And those are so wonderful because you get to just talk a little bit more in depth about that particular book. And then, your readers get to ask you direct questions, and that's lovely. So
That's such a great idea. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you take notes and you file them away. So do you plot a lot? Do you discovery write? Are you somewhere in between there? Maybe plot a little bit?
It's really what the saga folk are telling me they want to do. I mean, sometimes their actions are so clear that I don't need to really think about it. I would say the overall narrative arc is I know the deaths of the two main characters. I guess that's the terminal point, literally. If I've always seen that, and I always know that. Having said that, I know their deaths. I will also say that people are very attached to their children and the other characters, which are, risen to great prominence. So even the deaths of the two primary characters could possibly not be the end of the series. I like to joke that the series will only end when I do, but we'll see. We'll see how long I go with it. But I'm enjoying it so much, and it's a wonderful exploration. I mean, it's a deep exploration I'm making with these characters, and it's shared with my readers, and I feel very, very fortunate, to have such great readers who are so deeply engaged with the characters. That's blissful. That is truly blissful.
You must be very attached to Ceridwen if you've been writing about. She's been in your head for decades.
Yes. Although at this point, a longtime reader said she's the backstop. That she, ever since, she's living a much more settled life now, and a very happy life now. But of course, her children cause her concern. So that as her children are still, mostly in war-torn England, and her best friend Alfwin is still there. So there's she has concerns there. But yes, she is the beating heart of the books. But the focus is, it's a big concentric. It's called the Circle of Ceridwen because it's a big concentric circle that keeps expanding. She is the beating heart of it, but there's so many other characters who are far more active in their lives just because of their youth and their circumstances.
That's wonderful to have such a long-standing relationship with your characters and your books. And I know I agree. I have no idea when my series is going to end. It just it has a life of its own. It seems like
it does indeed.
Characters do. Mm-hmm. So, you've been writing for a long time, but what authors and books originally inspired you to start writing?
Nobody inspired me to start writing. I certainly can tell you a couple of authors I admire very much. I think the late great Mary Renault is just a superb writer of historical fiction. I mean, her retelling of the Theseus story, The King Must Die, and Bull from the Sea, I don't think those can be equaled. She's just somebody I look upon with tremendous respect and admiration. People have asked me, what do you think is the best historical novel ever written? I always say Tolstoy, War and Peace. And people are sometimes confused by that, but because they don't understand that Tolstoy was writing about events, the Napoleonic War that happened 50 years before he was writing. It was historical fiction. War and Peace is historical fiction.
Yes, it is.
And as I think for a single work, I mean, you're never gonna beat Leo, but Mary Renault would be somebody that I have immense admiration for.
I think I read her books about Alexander when I was
Yeah,
in
the
high
Persian
school.
boy, and yes, right,
I
right,
remember loving those books when I
yeah,
was a
right.
teenager.
Revisit them now because there's such richness there. I
Mm.
mean, she's really so brilliant.
Yeah, I've picked up a few that I've always loved and gone back and reread them. Rosemary Sutcliffe is another person that
Oh
I
yeah,
just love her
yeah,
books.
yeah. Well, there's always wonderful new things to discover, so that's understandable.
And then there's all the nonfiction you have to read to keep up on your research.
Very true. Very
True.
true.
So tell us, I mean, you kind of already started this, but what are you working on now and what's in the future? We kind of already touched on that a little bit, but
Yeah,
maybe
so
yeah.
I'm about 45,000 words into book 12, which is satisfying. I Last year I held 2 tours of Gotland so my readers could come and experience, again, the artifacts and the landscape of Gotland and really see how I saw it when I first came in 1999, and so that was wonderful, just taking them all around the island for a week and enjoying that. And we were in costume and it was great. So next year I'm going to have another tour, which will be based around our wonderful festival called Medeltidsvek, and it's Medieval Week. So that is going to take place in 2025. And then in 2026, I shall give 2 tours, one of which will be another saga tour, which will be really focused on my books and the Viking Age here. And the second one will be another Medeltidsvek and another Medieval Week tour. So sharing the island that way is really thrilling for me, and I'm it's a way for me to give back to the island that I love so well and has been so welcoming to me, to bring high quality visitors here who will be here for a week, and I can take them into the countryside and they will, spend money at small museums and small restaurants, and we visit farms, and just it's a big blessing on the island. And that's very important for me because I'm very interested in sustainable tourism. We've had huge influx since the Ukrainian war
Hmm.
started. The number of cruise ships that visit here in Visby had doubled overnight. I mean, overnight, so, and the cruise ships, they bring in massive numbers of people for several hours and then they go. I'm interested in giving people a deeper experience and allowing people to come here and breathe and enjoy the landscape and go to these sites which are so beautiful, whether they're Bronze Age burial mounds or one of our 100 magnificent 12th and 13th century churches in the countryside, and all the other sites that we have, the landscape. That's what I'm interested in. So this is definitely something that I'm doing and taking up my time and my attention. And I'm proud of these tours because it's a way, again, it's a great community building experience and wonderful friendships were made. A lot of the people that came on last year's tours are coming back
Nice.
next year, and so it's wonderful. I mean, it really deepens the bonds between your readers, and of course deepens our bonds. From so that's very very exciting. So I'm very content. I'm feeling very content because I have just extraordinary readers. I have a series of characters, the saga folk, that keep me fully engaged, so we say. And then on top of it, I can do something very special for the island of Gotland and for my readers, in bringing people here and sharing this magical island with them. So I'm very, very fortunate.
Oh, that's marvelous. It
Yeah.
sounds wonderful.
I love your attitude too. I love your generosity and your love of what you're doing and you're wanting to share it. It's very nice to see.
Yeah, and I wish that everybody who was writing about the Viking Age could come to Gotland because it's such an amazing resource. I mean, I've always loved the fact that when my first visit in September of 1999 was just a few short weeks after the largest Viking hoard ever discovered was found here, the Spillings hoard, which was found on the east coast up north, and there's 67 kilos of silver and another 20 kilos of finely worked Baltic bronze work. So I always thought that that was a really nice omen that that was discovered, and that this just more than 700 hoards have been found here, and there are far, far more Anglo-Saxon coins discovered on Gotland that have ever been discovered in Britain. Not raiding loot, but trading. Um, but most of our coins are dirhams. They're Arabic dirhams from
I was just
the
going to
Silk
say
trade. Yeah, yeah, hundreds of thousands of those. And if you come to our little museum, I invite you both. If you come here, I'll take you to our beautiful museum where you'll see an immense amount of silver and gold work, including our wonderfully unique women's jewelry, our crystals set in the silver mounts. The wonderful animal head brooches that the women wore instead of just the tortoise-shaped bronzes. The women here wore these wonderful animal head brooches at their shoulders, and the big round Gotlandic box brooches, which would fasten a very heavy. They're extremely heavy. I have a replica of one, and they're really heavy. So you've got to have like wadmal. You have to have really heavy wool shawl. The local museum is just chock-a-block with treasures to entice you. So
I might take you up on that.
oh, please do. Please do.
fun.
Really everybody, and then you'll see the stones. I mean, you'll just see these incredible stones and see, and see everything that we know about Viking ships and religious rituals and sun wheels, and there's just so much to see here. So.
I love your enthusiasm. Now I'm just like, oh, I want to get writing and go do some research or something.
Come to Gotland. Come to Gotland.
I actually have family in Sweden, so
wonderful. Where about?
In Elmholt, around
North or south? Right. Okay.
South.
Okay. And Skåne, which used to be Danish.
Yes.
Right.
A lot of Scandinavia used to be Danish.
That's right.
It's not just Scandinavia, England too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one question we didn't get to is, what's your writing routine like? I was starting to wonder that, and we omitted that question. So.
Yes. It's centered around this little device, my little recorder that I walk with every morning. I arise extremely early, usually at 4:30. I have a cup of coffee. I come up here for a few minutes. Then I head out with this recorder, and I tell myself the story as I'm walking. I walk for an hour. I walk through the town of Visby, always in the botanical garden. I always, it's about the halfway point in my walk when I reach the botanical garden. I walk through the botanical garden, mindfully, but I'm telling myself the story. Then I come back, and later in the morning, we'll do my transcription. I put on these headphones, plug this in, and I write. I very often, when I am writing, am talking to myself because, again, I'm telling myself the story. It's an oral tradition, and it is still very much for me, too. Then what comes out is very close to the final story. That I'm not a big drafts person. I will write, and then I will reread, and I will refine, obviously. I might move scenes around, but pretty much because I've done a lot of thinking before I start doing the writing, things are pretty close to what, the finished, words are going to be. So there's not a lot of that. And I think all of us do. I have a small coterie of dedicated first readers that I entrust the completed manuscript to, and they read it, and I ask them typically 6 or 7 questions about it, and I respect their opinions highly. I listen to everything they say, not acting upon it as much as absorbing it. This is so much discussion about the books and the characters and the way that people want them to go. But, the characters just do, I just write it down. The saga folk are going to do what the saga folk are going to do. I'm just here transcribing. So I'm lucky in that. And then, after I feel it's ready, then I go into post-production, and the script is given to Nat O'Nagel in London, my wonderful narrator, who's done every single one of my books. So she's done 12 of them already. And she does a fabulous performance of each one. And then I'm, bringing them out for all the different ebook platforms and in softcover and hardcover. And I repeat that process.
That's marvelous. What a wonderful routine. I love it. Walking through Gotland with your recorder.
That's right. That's right. I there's something about the repetitive action of walking is not only very meditative, but it's really, really helpful for my creative, stimulation. So
yeah, I walk almost every day too.
I go for a walk.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so that's the process. That is the process.
Nice.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That's very interesting. And so you've never thought about using any of the new transcription software that will actually take your recording and put it into text? I mean, speech to text is what I'm saying, like Dragon and there's a few of them.
I know Dragon has been around a long time. I've never experimented with them. What typically happens is that sometimes I'm speaking in fragments, so I'm stopping, the recording quite frequently and just riffing off of that. And I'm afraid if I was handed back something that was already, the words ahead of that point were already down there, I would, lose the quality of listening to me and listening to my voice, listening, and then, pausing as I flesh out an idea. It's not impossible that I might do that in the future, because I am admittedly the world's poorest typist, and just pathetic.
Next to me.
I don't know, John. After all of these words, and so many books, but I am really, really a sad typist. But I just like to have that kind of control in which I just stop the recording very easily with the mouse, and then I can just riff off of that on my keyboard and then go back to it. So, but maybe one of these days I will experiment with something like Dragon. Who knows? Who knows?
Sounds like a very natural and organic creative process.
Yes, it is. It is. And I said the oral storytelling part of it is really important. And I do sit up here telling myself the story as I'm working at this laptop. So
that's wonderful.
Any more questions?
No, I think we've come to the end of our questions. Anything else you'd like to tell us?
Yeah.
I thank you for your time. I thank you for your interest. And yes, I've enjoyed my hour with you. And I hope to see you both on Gotland.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Pleasure. It was our pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening. You can find Johanna at johannawittenberg.com, where you'll find a free short story, a prequel to her Norse Queen series. And you can find me, K.S., at ksbarton.com, where you can also find a free short story from me, a prequel to my Norse family series. See you next time.